Well, the poet Thomas Hardy wrote that there is a condition worse than blindness, and that is seeing something that isn't there. And yet, who of us hasn't done that? I mean, we think we see something so clearly, only to find out that we haven't seen clearly at all. There's a story told about a businesswoman named Marie from Minneapolis who had been away from her family on a 2-week business trip to Denver and was on her way home finally. And she was very eager to get there, but she needed to change planes here at lovely O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Now, it's not exactly a place you want to be if you expect to be on time, hassle-free, that departure. So Marie had 45 minutes to make her connecting flight, and luckily only had carry-on luggage. And she raced from one terminal to the other, opposite ends of the airport, of course, and she arrived breathless at the counter, only to be informed that her flight to Minneapolis was indefinitely delayed. And she is furious. And she rips the ticket from the seemingly unapologetic agent's hand. She turns in disgust, only to see looming before her a stand for Mrs. Fields cookies. She takes this as God's consolation to her, that if she has to be stuck in this godforsaken airport, she'll at least have Mrs. Fields cookies to keep her company. So Marie gets her bag of cookies, but of course she can't find a seat because everyone has been delayed. So she finally sees an empty one at a table with a woman with 2 children. So she motions to the woman, is it okay if I sit? The woman says, sure. So Marie takes out a book and begins to read. And so she reaches her hand in the bag for one of her delicious cookies, while the woman across from her with the 2 kids puts her hand in the bag and takes 3 cookies, one for herself and one for each of her 2 children. Well, I don't have to tell you that Marie is in no mood for this woman now to be eating her cookies, but of course she doesn't say anything. She's trying to compose herself. She puts her hand back in the bag for another cookie, and the woman with the 2 kids puts her hand back in the bag and takes 3 more cookies, one for herself and one for each of her 2 children. Well, Marie is about ready to fly to Minneapolis on her own without a plane by this point. She is so angry. And finally, there are 3 cookies left in the bag. And Marie defiantly puts her hand in the bag and takes a cookie. And the woman across from her with the 2 kids puts her hand back in the bag and takes the last 2 cookies and gives them to her 2 children. Well, thank God they are now finally calling the flight as ready to depart to Minneapolis, because any longer and Marie would have lunged across the table at this woman. And she stands up and she crumples the bag in front of her and she gives the woman a dirty look, and she's talking to herself the whole way to the plane. What kind of crazy world is this? I get stuck in this godforsaken airport with this crazy woman eating my cookies. And she finally gets on the plane, puts her carry-on bag on her lap to get something out of it. And what does she find? But her bag of Mrs. Fields cookies. Yeah, the whole time she had been eating the woman's cookies. There is a wise maxim in spirituality that says, we do not see things as they are, we see things as we are. And it's similar to what Thomas Hardy wrote about seeing things that aren't there. We are so conditioned to view the world through subjective filters that often we miss the truth that stares us right in the face. You recall the story of the man born blind in the Gospel of John, chapter 9, when Jesus spits on the ground and makes clay and smears it on the eyes of the man born blind, and something new is created? Just like when God uses clay in the Old Testament to breathe life into humankind and create something new, the blind man becomes a new creation when his eyes are open to who Jesus really is and to the potential he finds in following the message of Jesus. Notice, however, that he's not the only blind person in the story. There are a lot of blind people in this narrative. Take the disciples, who surmise the guy is blind because he must have sinned and he's being punished. I mean, they aren't seeing too clearly. The neighbors, who say the blind man is a simple beggar and that all this suddenly seeing stuff must be a trick of some kind. Or the Pharisees, who refuse to admit that anything good or life-giving has occurred in this healing. And you know, even the blind man's parents, who are so full of fear of the Jewish authorities that even they can't admit that something wonderful has happened here. They even come close to disowning their own son when they say, well, we are not really sure how his eyes were opened. I mean, ask him. He's of age. He can speak for himself. And you know what? That's exactly what the blind man does. He says, look, all I know is I was blind and now I can see, and this man Jesus did it. And yes, I believe in him. That belief and faith changes the blind man's life. He has indeed become a new creation. And isn't that really the goal of all of us? To see clearly what is true and to testify to it and to live in the light of that truth. Yet so often it's more comfortable to remain in darkness, to refuse to see, to maybe ignore a problem with our child because we don't know how to confront it, to pretend an addiction isn't part of our lives because we may have to give it up if we do, to dismiss another faith as dangerous or wrong because we don't want to take the time to see what it's really all about, to see someone else of another color or language or culture as the enemy because that's easier than actually getting to know him or her, to not see what is right in front of us because to see it might mean we have to change, and deep down, we don't want to. If we allow ourselves to see the demands of faith and its implications, that it's going to change us, how we act, how we think, how we live, and sometimes it's just easier to simply close our eyes to it all, to live in darkness, to embrace myopia, to refuse to be a new creation. So maybe today, as you listen to this, it's an opportunity to have your eyes opened just a bit, not by me, but by the source of all life, all goodness, all possibilities, to believe that God desires us to see so that we might live more authentically, but how instead we sometimes prefer the shroud of inauthenticity. The author Alice Walker has a wonderful line in her book, The Color Purple. She writes, when you walk past the color purple in a field and don't notice it, it gets God mad. Now, of course, Alice Walker uses a bit more colorful language in the book, but this is a family program. But how often do we do that? Miss what is right in front of us, walk past it, or see something that isn't there, or maybe have our hands in somebody else's cookie bag, thinking it's our own? The call today is to hear the gentle voice of a God who wishes to bring us into the light of day with all its possibilities and potential. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it is a little scary, but the alternative is even scarier. The song goes, I want to walk as a child of the light. I want to follow Jesus. And most times, that's going to mean not seeing things just as we are, but as they really are.